Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is an honor. I'm sitting in your executive boardroom. I'm going to call it that. I don't quite know where we are
Sure.
other than a boardroom.
Yeah.
Thrilled to be chatting with you. All things Tulsa. I'm a Tulsan through and through. Went to Berry Hill back in the day. I would love to dive in early on with 8-year term. Here we are. We're towards the tail end of your service. Incredible. Let's start early on. I always like exploring early on. So early GT life, what does that look like? Love to hear about your family, your parents specifically, those formidable years early on.
Grew up here in Tulsa. I'm the fifth generation of my family on the Bynum side to live here in Tulsa. So my great grandparents came here in the 1870s and been here ever since. And my granddad was the mayor when I was born, and he retired when I was about 6 months old. So I don't really recall his administration, but I've heard about it all my life. And then my mom, his oldest daughter, the only Tulsan in history to be the daughter of a mayor and the mother of a mayor.
Okay, all right.
And then my dad ran a company that's still there on North Peoria called Gt Bynum Company. Mm-hmm. It was started, I'm the fourth Gt Bynum, so it was started by my great-granddad during the Great Depression, and it was a machine shop that built oil field equipment, pipe straighteners and stuff like that. And so my great-grandfather founded it, my granddad ran it, and my granddad was just a master salesman. I mean, he drove 100,000 miles a year through the 50s, 60s, and 70s, building up the client base for that company, which that company is still running on the client base that he built up, and they haven't had a salesperson since he retired in the mid-1980s. So it's pretty remarkable.
Yeah.
My dad sold it to the employees when I was a kid, but grew up with that, went to Elliott Elementary, and then to Cascia Hall for middle school and high school. But Tulsa, when I was growing up here, there was always this sense that it was a really special place. Mm-hmm. You know, we had wonderful parks to go to, spent a lot of time as a kid. I thought Zinc Park was like the coolest place in the world with the rocks that you could climb up and down and a creek that you could go down and catch things out of.
Yep.
Woodward Park was also... When I was a kid, it felt like it was like 10,000 acres in size. I mean, it was amazing. We'd go catch tadpoles in the pond there by the Rose Garden. And I just had a wonderful experience in Tulsa. Growing up, Philbrook, of course, was a huge focal point for us as well. So there were always wonderful things to do here as a city growing up, and I felt really fortunate.
When you were young, let's bring it back to Elliott. Been there many a times. My kids don't go there, but we frequent the playground there quite a bit.
Yeah.
Early on, it's always interesting to me because as many might, I don't know, some of these big national leaders, is there's inklings of leadership early on. Do you ever find yourself looking back at those elementary years? It might be more on the Cascia side, but what things kind of led you to think, you know what, my dad's doing this, I could do this?
So, I think an important fact about Elliott that ages me greatly with my kids is when I started at Elliott, we didn't have air conditioning. We literally...
Wait, should I be asking you how old you are? Because that's
well, that's what it makes me sound like. I grew up in like the 1890s. But I mean, in the August and early September, we would have a break mid-afternoon where they would give us frozen blocks of orange juice to suck on to cool ourselves down. So I remember what a huge deal it was when we finally got air conditioning at Elliott, and we even had the campaign to raise the money for it. It was Where the Cool Go to School.
That's hilarious.
So,
Please tell me you came up with that. You're a marketer.
No.
You're a marketer.
I just thought it was amazing. But no, I think for me, probably the big thing for me from a leadership standpoint when I was that young was that my mom would buy me these books. I got really hooked on history as a kid, fascinated by being able to go places and think about people who'd been there before and the lives that they had and what they did in those places. And then my mom started buying me, it was a series called the childhoods of famous Americans. So like George Washington, what was his life until he was like 12 years old?
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
but she bought me like one or two, and I like burned through them. And so then she would go back, and then it was like a treat to go to the bookstore and pick one out.
What bookstore in Tulsa? Let's dive into the details here.
So at that time, it's not even there anymore. There was this little bookstore. Gosh, I wish I could remember the name of it, but it was in Utica Square, kind of by where the Polo Grill is.
Okay. Yep.
But they had like stuffed in the back. They had a little shelf with the Childhood of Famous Americans series back there. So every time I finished one, we could go back and get another. So I loved.
So she was kind of teeing you up here, of like.
I think it was very important to my mom that I be a reader, and I read Hardy Boys books and those, and it was like she found something that I liked to read, and so once she realized what I liked to read, then she would just keep getting it. It could have been about anything. It just happened to be about history and people in American history. So I think that's probably. I never was like. Well, I take that back. I ran for class president in 4th grade and was elected.
I would say that's pretty much DNA right there.
Well,
4th grade.
But here's the hitch. So the next year I ran for re-election in 5th grade, and our music teacher, Mrs. Torres, gets up and she goes, "Okay, now this year when you're voting, don't elect someone as a joke." I was like,
you
what?
Were a joke. You
Wait,
considered it a joke.
Was I the joke?
That's pretty funny. Miss Torres, you did me wrong.
And I lost.
Oh, no.
Well, this mean little girl ran the campaign against me. Lots of negative ads in the 5th grade circuit at Elliott, and beat me, and like 10 years later introduced me to my wife. Oh. So we're square on that now.
That's pretty funny.
Yeah.
So 4th grade campaigning, what does that look like?
Getting up and giving a speech in front of the class about what you wanted to do. And I couldn't tell you for the life of me what I could have pledged.
Were you a goofball, though? Did people latch on to maybe?
No.
I can see how sometimes.
No, I was never the class clown.
Okay.
I always, I think, have just had lots of friends because I'm always like to find things in common with people. But no, I wasn't like the most popular guy in class by any standard. Never very athletic. And there were funnier people in our class.
Okay. So where did you find yourself in the groups? Not the jocks, because, and I know we're 4th grade.
No,
here,
I was definitely the geeks.
Okay.
Definitely the geeks, though my friends wouldn't appreciate being lumped into that category. But we were the geeks. And same in high school, on the captain of the debate team.
I love it.
But also the thing I found in high school, like I was fortunate, at least in our class, like you had sort of that identity, but it wasn't like people didn't hang out with each other in different groups.
Sure.
Because our class was small enough, everybody was friends and hung out with one another. So I didn't really get serious about like leadership until I went to college.
Okay.
And then I ran for class senator for the Liberal Arts College at Villanova, where I went to Villanova. I really didn't know anybody there. And that's what built my confidence in this. Before, I'd always was on the debate team. I liked giving speeches. I was fascinated by history, but really hadn't ever been elected to anything. But then in college, to go to a place where you don't know anybody, and it's in Philly, so like most of my classmates are from New Jersey and New York and Pennsylvania, and all thought I talked really funny. And so then to run for our college, to be one of the 2 senators from the college, and then ran for student body president my senior year and got elected, that was when it really became like, oh gosh, like this thing I'm fascinated by that could actually be something I could do.
Right.
And have never lost an election since.
Philly, why Villanova? Like, was it a family influence there?
So the priests that run Cascia Hall run Villanova, as well as actually Cascia was founded by a president of Villanova who left to kind of create a place in the central United States for the Augustinian order of the Catholic Church. And so they recruit heavily at Cascia. My year, I was the only person, but I think pretty much every year somebody from Cascia ends up going to Villanova.
That's interesting.
Uh-huh.
So being in debate, going back to the debate side, you said you really enjoyed debate and speeches. Would you say it was just public speaking as a whole, or did you really like to dive into a subject matter and really attack it maybe from a couple different angles? What about the debate team. What about that did you really find fascinating?
Well, one, I enjoy public speaking. It's one of those things, like I tell people, like I think any of us, like you like to do things you're good at.
Right.
And each of us have different talents, and that just happens to be one that I was lucky enough in high school to discover I had. I joined the debate team as a prank. I didn't even, like my friend and I wanted to antagonize these girls that were on the team, and so we joined it as a joke. And then I went to my first debate tournament.
And when was this? Give me a framework of time.
Sophomore year of high school.
Okay.
And got totally destroyed by this kid from Sepulpa. And I remember thinking like, well, this doesn't feel very good.
Yeah.
Like I don't ever want to find myself in this position again. And so then got very serious about it and was a state champion in it. But I enjoyed the public speaking side. The thing I enjoyed about debate, though, the most, like debate, there are lots of different kind of categories you can do, is that what I found is if you're going to be really effective, you have to understand the other side's point of view and the point that they're making if you're going to beat them. Just saying what you think over and over and over again isn't going to win.
Right.
And by nature, like you don't know until you go to the debate which side you're supposed to argue. And so it forced me to think through things from both points of view. And by my senior year, I got to the point where I would develop a case that was so common ground, middle of the road, that I would argue the exact same thing whether I was pro or con, and nobody could beat me. Except in the state finals, my friend who did the same thing beat me. But that was a transformational thing for me, and I've taken that approach ever since. Like in this work, I can't imagine doing the job that I do without feeling confident as a public speaker, and like finding common ground with people has been the main thing that I've done, whether it's in this job or on the city council or working as an aide in the U.S. Senate. Like that's always been my niche, is to try and find common ground with other people and then bring that.
I love that. I'm going to stay in the debate because I find this fascinating. I don't know anything. So I was homeschooled. So there's lots of judgment to be cast about my formidable years of education. But I really don't, again, excuse my naivete. Do they give you subjects?
Yes.
And they have a pro and a con side. And by the end of it, the winner is the one that argues your case best.
So there's lots of different kinds. So the one that's most familiar for folks is called Lincoln Douglas.
Okay.
And that is where for a month there's one subject.
Okay.
And when you show up, you're either going to have to vote, you're going to argue the case pro or con. You don't get to decide. They tell you.
Oh, how do you study for this? How do you prepare?
It takes hours and hours and hours.
You're on one side and then you flip the script and study on the other side?
Yes, but you get to use that one case for the month to launch the debate. And then after that, it's all about what the other person is saying and going back and forth. And then there's a judge who decides who wins.
Okay.
So I did well in that. The thing I did probably better at, though, was this thing called extemporaneous speaking, where you go into a room and they hand you a subject. I did domestic extemporaneous, so any like issue of domestic news,
like current
affairs that
events.
Like is happening in the United States. They give you the subject, and you have 30 minutes to write a 7-minute speech and memorize it with sources and facts, and then go deliver it. And so I was the state champion in that. I went to the national tournament in that. And again, still use it all the time. I drive our communications people here crazy at the city because they'll give me all these talking points, and then I just go and wing it.
You were literally prepping for the current seat you're currently in years ago.
Yes. Yeah.
Wow.
Other fun thing, not really related to me, but one of my teammates on the debate team when I was in high school was Bill Hader.
Oh, nice. I love
guy
that.
who things worked out okay for. might have heard of him. And he was an amazing talent. He didn't do debate. He did like the dramatic performance or humorous interpretation of plays and stuff. And he was fantastic.
How well did you know Bill?
Well, and I mean, on a first name basis.
Yeah.
Sit around and, I mean, he was just a merciless imitator of other people. He could do impressions of anybody, and it would just be a dead ringer every time. Now, we all just loved having him there. I wouldn't have, if you told me he'd go on and be this like nationally known, award-winning director and writer and actor. I wouldn't have predicted that. But it's been really cool to see that happen to somebody that you knew way back when.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Really cool. You had mentioned earlier that early on you just started winning. And that gave you the confidence through early on through high school and college to go into obviously where we are today. What was some of those primary factors? Obviously confidence. We can just say confidence was a big of just being able to walk in even despite the odds, coming in and just maybe instinct, like I don't know what's going through your head of like, I'm going to win this thing, and being just tenacious about it, because obviously there's a lot of these elements happening.
Well, I think first of all, confidence is not it. It's running scared every time. I'm very competitive. My wife and kids will tell you, like, I don't like to play board games.
Okay. You're one of those people.
If there's a chance I'm going to lose, this isn't fun for me. You guys have a great time.
Okay. All right. Yeah.
So
it's not confidence. I stand corrected.
It isn't confidence.
Okay.
I think there is a competitiveness in going into it. But I got great advice one time. My first boss out of college was Senator Don Nichols from Oklahoma. And he was the youngest Republican ever elected to the Senate. And one time I was with him and I got up the nerve to ask him, I said, you have any advice for somebody who might want to run for office one day? And he said, yes, you run as hard as you can, whether you're running for dog catcher or president of the United States. You give it everything you have.
Yeah.
And he said, that's what I did. And then you learn how hard you can actually run. And he's like, that's what gave me confidence to run for the U.S. Senate, because I knew I could put in the work. Some people can't.
Yeah.
And so I think there's that. And the other one, which might go back to elementary school now that I think about it, is when I was a kid at Elliott, the big annual fundraising drive was selling these world famous chocolate bars.
By world famous, you mean
they were called? No, that's literally the brand name.
That's the name. Okay.
Yeah, it's literally world famous
funny.
chocolate bars,
Okay.
and you'd have to go door to door selling your neighbors. And again, my parents be like, just go around the block and sell as many as you can, and that'll be what you do for Elliott.
Yeah.
And so I got in the hang of door-to-door direct sales on behalf of a cause when I was in elementary school.
That's amazing.
And so when I was at Villanova, every time I ran, I was out in the dorms, knocking the doors, meeting the people I wanted to represent. When I ran for the city council, I was out knocking doors, meeting the people I wanted to represent. And when I ran for mayor, I did the exact same thing. And I always tell people who are thinking about running, there's levels where that becomes less effective. If you're going to run for Congress or for governor, like knocking doors in a neighborhood is not the best use of your time. But for pretty much everything below that, it's the most effective tool in a campaign. Lots of people get caught up in, I got to be strong on social media, or I got to raise a bunch of money so I can send people mail pieces that they'll throw in the trash.
Yeah.
But the people who usually win, in my experience, are the ones who go out and meet the most people and work the hardest at meeting the people that they're going to represent.
Yeah.
And I've always done that, and I think that's a key reason I've been successful.
You had made a comment, and this is kind of ties into what we're talking about now, that you got advice of run as hard as you can.
Yes.
When I hear the word run as hard as you can, what I'm coming up with might be a little bit different. And I know everybody that's running, technically, that it probably is different for them. It could be knocking doors. It could be trying to get on every, social media outlet, getting your word out there. What was that for you, running as hard as you can? Was that door knocking and getting in front of as many people as possible?
So in, I would say, like campus stuff and then city council, it was door knocking.
Okay.
And just, it's easy to say like, go knock a bunch of doors. Knocking doors is hard. There's a reason people don't want to do it.
Right.
Because being a door-to-door salesperson, you're not greeted with esteem everywhere you go. And, you're encountering people when they're not expecting you to show up.
Right.
The flip side is what I've found, most people never get to meet the people that are asking them for the honor of representing them. And so they really like the chance to talk with you and let you know what they think. So those races, that was it. For mayor, it was totally different. I did door knocking on the weekends when more people would be home in targeted areas where we knew that we had to be more competitive. But for the most part, it was raising money, which I'd go knock doors all day rather than beg people for money. And that was really hard to get used to. And that's something that you have to do at any other level.
Oh, sure.
Because you have to be able to buy lots of ad time on TV and online. And if you don't, somebody else is going to and define you instead of you being able to define yourself. So that was a lot of, and in the mayor's race in 2016, I mean, that was as hard as I've worked on any campaign because we were the complete underdog from the outset. And really, even on election day, I think I was the only person who thought we were going to win.
Well, I guess that's really the only, at the end of the day, that's the only one that really matters,
me and
right?
the voters.
Yeah. What was one of those, give me a story. It sounds like you've knocked hundreds of doors. Thousands.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thousands. Give me one or two stories. What was either the most interesting, the most obscure?
So many
like,
stories.
give me something.
Well, I'll give you two. I mean, one is not really a specific story about a person, but you'd be stunned the number of people that answer the door naked. And
I was anticipating that, but
I've asked other candidates this. I was like, "Did this happen to you?" And they're like, "Oh yeah, gosh." And I was like, every time
on purpose. They're showing up on purpose.
I get like they didn't forget that they didn't have clothes
male
on.
and female.
But it's not like predator kind of stuff, but just they're very comfortable with themselves.
Good for them.
And I worked very hard to maintain strict eye contact while
How
introducing myself.
How long were you sitting there talking to these?
Well, usually, I mean, it could run anywhere from a minute to longer than that.
That's hilarious.
But there are so many stories from knocking doors. But the other one would be, I was, it was when I was running for mayor at 16, and I was walking up to this guy's house, and he's sitting in his garage at a workbench. And as I get he's working, and as I get closer, I see he's filing bullets down. And so I walk up.
Should I leave? Or?
And I'm like, no, I need this guy's vote. So I walk right up, and I'm like, hey, sir, sorry to interrupt you. I'm Gt Bynum, run for mayor. Just want to introduce myself. And he takes my thing, and he goes, well, what do you think about gun control? And I was like, well, sir, I'm a lifetime member of the NRA, work for Don Nichols, Tom Coburn. I'm against it. He goes, well, you could get the hell out of here, and throws my brochure and gets up and starts chasing me down the driveway.
No way. Were you alone?
My wife was working the other side of the street and sees this happening. So I'm running down this guy's driveway. He's chasing me. He's like, I can't believe you'd want to represent us in the United States of America, and you're against the Second Amendment. And when he said that, I turned around and I was like, whoa. And I got mad. I was like, I said I'm against gun control. I'm pro Second Amendment. And he goes, oh, I thought you said you were against guns. It's like, no, I worked for Nichols and Coburn.
That's so
So he's
funny.
like, oh, you can put a sign in my yard if you want.
I feel bad. Put a sign there. Yeah.
Right. Sorry I terrified you. And
yeah.
so I did. I'm not sure that helped me on that
That's
street
hilarious.
if he treats his neighbors the same way.
Yeah.
But yeah.
That's a great story. That's a really great
But that's
story.
the thing. You never know who you're going to encounter. Now, you'll regret you asked me this.
No,
my last one, I went to, this is kind of the other side of the coin. I was knocking doors around La Fortune Park when I was running for re-election to the city council. And I went up to this old lady's house and knocked on the door. Hi, ma'am. I'm Gt Bynum, running for city council. I want to represent you. I've been on the council before, but your neighborhood just got moved into my district. I'd really appreciate your vote. And she's like, oh, my husband is working in the backyard. Come in. I want you to meet him. And I was just out by myself, like literally driving from house to house. My car is sitting in front of her house with the driver's door open.
Oh,
and I go in. And she's like, here, have a seat. Brings me some tea.
Okay.
Goes and gets her husband. He comes in. We have a 30-minute conversation in their living room while my car is sitting in front of their house running with the door open. And the whole time I thought, if it gets stolen, it gets stolen. I got to, every vote matters. And so by the end of it, they loved me.
You had some drive.
Walked back out.
Wow.
Walked back out, and the car was still there. So here's for the Fortune Park Plaza neighborhood being a safe place to just leave your car idling. Yeah.
Sorry I interrupted, but when you're talking, I'm like, the amount of drive, the amount of just competitiveness or something. Just you'd mentioned it in that previous story of like, I need this vote.
Yes.
Just the tenacity of just going out there is incredible.
Well, every one of them matters.
It does.
And that's the thing. I mean, these aren't, when you run for office, if you know what you're doing, you get a list of the people who vote frequently. So you're not out. I'm not out there sitting in the living room for 30 minutes with people who haven't voted in 10 years. Like, this is with likely voters. And yes, I think if you're going to take the time to be out there, then you want to seal the deal.
Right. I just find that very interesting. We'll wrap up this whole thing with anyone, and you mentioned it earlier, I'm sure you get a lot of people asking you for advice if they want to run for city council, if they want to run for any kind of seat in government, in the public eye. What 3 tips would you give that person? We've talked about door knocking. In this current day and age, 2024, what would you say if door knocking would one of them? What's the other 2?
The most important is know why you want that job. I've never run for anything without having at least 3 things in mind that I'm committed to achieving if I get to do that job. And you'd be shocked. In this job as mayor, everybody who runs for office comes by to meet with me to learn about Tulsa or ask for an endorsement. And you'd be stunned by the number of people who seek public office because they want the perceived glamour of the job with no idea what they would do if they actually got in. And so I think that's a disservice to the citizens. And I don't know how you're motivated to work hard if you don't know what you would do once you got the job. Right. So that's number one. Have really clear understanding, because it's a great sacrifice. I can't imagine having done this job and the sacrifices my family has had to make and put them through everything that they've been through if I didn't know exactly, the purpose of why we're doing what we're doing. So that's number one. Number 2, if you don't know about campaigns or you're interested in them, the best way is just to volunteer on one. Every campaign will kill for volunteers. I mean, love the donors, but you crawl across broken glass for people who are going to volunteer on your campaign. And I started campaigning when I was a kid, I would have been 12, as a volunteer on Dewey Bartlett's campaign for the city council. That was the first campaign I ever worked on, and have been involved in them ever since. But that was another way that I knew what to do because I'd worked on campaigns and seen what worked and what didn't. And then the third one, I just can't emphasize it enough, is get out there and meet the people that you want to serve. And that's not just important to win the election. It's also super important once you get in, because what I found after I got elected to the city council the first time, I won the election, got in, and then all of a sudden all these special interest people show up and say, well, I represent the silent majority, and let me tell you what we really think. And I thought, I don't need you to tell me what my voters think, because I just spent a year out meeting them and hearing what they think. And I have a direct line of communication to them right now. That's also key once you're in the office. But I think those are probably the 3 most important things for anybody that would think about running for office: is know why you want to do it, get out and meet the people that you want to serve. And so, that would be my advice.
I love that. When I think of 2016 and even taking that back and running it again in 2020, I think that it was interesting because Gt Bynum has become, obviously, as a mayor of this city, become a figure for a lot of people. And there's one aspect that maybe you had planned this, maybe you hadn't. Your glasses have become iconic. Right. Was this a plan? Was this
I have to wear them.
Well,
they are prescription.
They're not just. So I've seen on different ads, there's iconic glasses. Yeah. Tell me a little bit about more of that. Did it just something that you preferred? That's that style? Like, I don't know. I just found that interesting.
No, like a year before I ran for mayor, I needed a new pair of glasses, and I went to Black Optical on Brookside, and Gary, who runs that, gave me several to look at, and I took them home, tried them on for my wife. She thought these looked the best. I had no idea that they would become, like such a part of my identity. I'm afraid to ever change them now.
That's so funny.
And I've also been shocked. Like I always thought as a kid growing up, you think there's no way people didn't know that Clark Kent was Superman. What, you just take your glasses off and nobody recognizes you all of a sudden? You look exactly the same, but your glasses aren't on and everyone doesn't know who you are. It's true.
Really?
If I go places and I don't have these things on, people have no idea who I am, or they think I'm James Adelot, the meteorologist.
Oh, there you go. That's really funny. Before we got on, and I cannot not ask this question. I find it hilarious. You had made a post on Instagram, obviously, as your final days in office, about a special running mate that you had.
Not a running mate.
Well, I'm sorry. I'll let you finish that statement. But Paul Tay, I specifically want to talk about that moment that he ran in and interrupted. What was going through your head? What was going on? So maybe I teed you up enough probably here. Let's walk me through that scenario, that story.
Again, in 2016, I'm running against an incumbent mayor who had just been reelected 3 years earlier by a landslide against his predecessor. They both had 100% name ID. She spent $2.5 million, and he won handily. So we knew this was an uphill climb to win the election. And I felt, in that one of our real opportunities was we wanted to have as many debates as possible, because the more times I can be on a stage with him and people hear my message and see me as a peer to him, not as some kid who's on the city council, that helps. Every time that happens, that helps. Well, this was going to be our big televised debate of the whole campaign cycle at the TCC McKeon Center. And so they were very strict about how many people you could invite to be in the audience. I think it was only like 4 people. And I show up with my campaign manager an hour before the debate's supposed to start, and I see Paul Tay sitting in the audience. And my first thought was, the other candidates were mad that they'd been left out. Mayor Bartlett and I were the only 2 invited to this debate. I was like, Mayor Bartlett invited the other candidates who got left out. Well played. I wish I had thought of that.
Strategy. Yeah.
And so I leaned over to the moderator and I was like, do we invite Paul? And he's like, oh, no. He just came in and sat down. And I was like, he and I have run against each other 4 times now. This is not going to go well. And they're like, he said he'd be on his best behavior. And I'm like, I'm telling you, it's not going to work out the way you think it is. And they're like, no, he's fine. I was like, okay, your debate, not mine. So we get to minute 58 of an hour-long debate, and I am feeling very good about how this debate has gone. I think I have compared and defined myself well as a candidate. I think my answers have matched up well against Mayor Bartlett's, and we're both we're getting ready to offer our closing statements. And all of a sudden, you have to imagine yourself from our vantage point, we're at these podiums, there's bright lights shining on us, we can't see the audience. And then out of the darkness behind the camera appears this cowboy hard hat. And then Paul Tay jumps up on the stage and starts pointing into the camera and yelling. And my immediate thought is, told ya, I told ya. And he's yelling. The poor guy in charge of it comes up and he's trying to get him off, because this is live TV. He's trying to get Paul off the stage. Mayor Bartlett's calling 911. And the whole time I'm just sitting there totally annoyed by this, because I'm like, I knew this would happen.
Right.
And now everything that I just said for the last 58 minutes, no one will ever remember it. This is all anyone's going to remember.
You ruined this.
Yeah, so Paul keeps going, and then they have a little TV off to the side so I can see that we've gone off air. So Paul and I know each other really well because we've run against each other so many times. So I yell at him. I'm like, Paul. And he finally, because I hadn't been yelling at all, that caught his attention. He looked over and I was like, dude, we're not on TV anymore. Look. And he looks up, sees it, smiles, and walks out of the studio. So that night,
and that was it.
That night, my campaign manager and I were furious because we thought this was our best shot, and we lost because this clown totally hijacked the whole thing. What I didn't appreciate until the next couple of days folded out was that people, I think unfairly, I didn't say it at the time, but I'll say it now, they compared the reactions that Mayor Bartlett and I had, where Mayor Bartlett called 911 and I just sat there and watched, And people were like, oh, GT was so cool under pressure, and Mayor Bartlett panicked, and see, GT's ready on day one, and Mayor Bartlett panicked. And in reality, I wasn't panicked because I had seen him do this stuff for 8 years. Like, I was unsurprised in any way. Whereas Mayor Bartlett had never been in a debate with Paul before. He didn't know that this was going to happen. And it ended up having a huge impact on the outcome of that campaign.
You can find that. I'm pretty sure it's YouTube or whatever.
Oh, trust me. My kids watch it all the time. My son's friends know me as the guy from the Paul Tay video.
It's so funny because now that you say that about your guys' reaction, now knowing a little bit more backstory of where you were at mentally versus doing, and what's funny is you can see almost the worry on his face. Something's happening. I got to call somebody.
Yes.
And you're just like calmly like, come on, dude. You could almost see a little bit of that frustration of like, bro, we're wrapping it up, man.
Yes.
That's really funny.
Yes.
That's
and
a
I
great
think those
story.
were authentic reactions from both of us, but I don't fault him for his reaction at all.
Dude, that's hilarious. I want to sit here and ask you a lot more questions. We're wrapping up on your time here. Do you have anything, as you're kind of phasing yourself out, maybe you're not, maybe you're going strong till the end. Is there anything that you want to tell people about your 8 years in office? Is there anything, closing remarks, anything that comes to mind of like, obviously appreciation, but outside of appreciation of the thank yous, is there anything that you would like to share to the Tulsa people?
I think the biggest change that has happened in our city in the last 8 years is when I was running for mayor in 2016, I would say in every debate, every speech, that I don't want us competing with Broken Arrow, Owasso, and Jinx anymore, which is what we've been obsessed with. I want us working with them to compete with Austin, Denver, and Chicago. I want us to expect to be among and competitive with the best cities in the world. And when I would say that in 2016, people would laugh. Like, that was how low the self-confidence of our community had gotten. And today, people expect that. People are upset if they don't think that we're competing with the best and striving to be the best. And this generation of young Tulsans, my kids and their friends, like, they're growing up taking for granted that, of course, we have the best park in America in Tulsa. And, of course, we're building a lake in the middle of the city, even though people didn't do it for 60 years after it was proposed. Of course, we're building a museum to house the greatest collection of American art and history outside of what the federal government owns. And so that the level of creativity that I see in Tulsa that has been unlocked by having those higher expectations has me so excited about the future of our city. And I guess my challenge to my fellow Tulsans as I leave office is that we don't let that slide, that we keep our expectations high, that we always try to make our city better tomorrow than it was yesterday. And as long as we keep that focus, the days ahead for Tulsa are super bright, and it's going to be really cool to see.
I love it. Thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
I love chatting with you. Again, thank you again for the time.
Appreciate it.